Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to talk about one of the biggest misconceptions in modern relationships, the belief that you are responsible for your partner's happiness. Now let's be clear, happiness is a deeply personal responsibility. It is not something you can outsource to your partner, nor is it something they can demand from you. And yet we see this idea everywhere. People entering relationships with the expectation that their partner will make them feel complete, that their presence alone should bring them endless joy. But that's an unrealistic burden to place on anyone. The truth is that you are responsible for your own emotions, just as your partner is responsible for theirs. Your actions matter, of course. They affect the relationship. But the emotional state of another person is ultimately their responsibility, just as yours is yours. If you go into a relationship believing that your job is to keep your partner happy at all times, you will either become a slave to their emotions or crushed by the weight of that responsibility. Either way, the relationship will eventually suffer. So today, we're going to break this idea apart. We're going to talk about why you are not responsible for your partner's happiness, how to take responsibility for your own actions, and what a truly healthy, mature relationship looks like. Let's get into it. The danger of making someone else responsible for your happiness. Now let's flip the perspective for a moment. Imagine you're in a relationship and you fully expect your partner to make you happy. What does that mean practically? It means you're putting your entire emotional well-being in someone else's hands. If they say the right things, you feel good. If they don't, you feel bad. If they forget an anniversary, suddenly your whole day is ruined. If they are having a bad day themselves, you might start feeling resentful, as if they're failing in their duty to keep you happy. This is a dangerous way to live, because when you put your happiness in someone else's hands, you become dependent on them, not in a healthy, supportive way, but in a fragile, unstable way. And the same thing happens in reverse. If you believe it's your job to make someone else happy all the time, you start bending over backward, constantly worried about their mood, constantly trying to control their emotional state. You cannot control another person's emotions. Let me say that again. You cannot control another person's emotions. You can support them, you can love them, you can offer kindness and encouragement, but at the end of the day, their emotions are theirs to manage, just as yours are yours. Now here's where things get even trickier. When you take on responsibility for someone else's happiness, you are, in effect, trying to control their emotional state, and most of the time, you don't even realize it. You start avoiding conflict, walking on eggshells, filtering your words to make sure you don't upset them. You start altering your behavior, not because it's the right thing to do, but because you fear how they might react. And in doing so, you begin to lose yourself. This is what happens in relationships where one person believes they are responsible for the other's emotions. They give up their own needs, desires, and even values to avoid upsetting their partner. And what does that lead to? Resentment, frustration, a loss of identity, and eventually the relationship collapses under the weight of it all. Because here's the truth, no one can sustain that role forever. You cannot live your life constantly managing another person's emotional well-being. The importance of personal accountability. So what's the alternative? How do you build a relationship where both people take responsibility for their own happiness instead of expecting the other to carry that burden? It starts with one key principle, personal accountability. That means understanding that your actions are your responsibility, but your partner's reactions are theirs. You should always strive to be a good, honest, and kind partner, but you are not in charge of how they process their emotions. Let's break this down. You are responsible for your words and behavior. If you speak harshly, that's on you. If you break a promise, that's on you. If you neglect your partner's emotional needs entirely, that's on you. Your partner is responsible for how they react to those things. If they feel hurt, that is something they need to express and work through. If they struggle with insecurities, they need to do their own inner work. If they have past wounds, they need to address them, not expect you to fix them. Now let's be very clear, this doesn't mean you should be careless or dismissive of your partner's emotions. A healthy relationship is built on empathy, mutual respect, and support. But there is a big difference between supporting someone and carrying their emotional weight for them. Now, if you truly want to build a strong, fulfilling relationship, you need to set clear boundaries between what is yours to carry and what belongs to your partner. A boundary is simply an understanding of where your responsibility ends and theirs begins. It's saying, I will support you, but I will not take on your emotional burdens as my own. Let me give you an example. Imagine your partner is having a stressful day at work. They come home irritated, frustrated, maybe even snappy. Now you have a choice. You could take their frustration personally, assuming it's your job to fix their mood, bending over backward to make them feel better, or you could recognize that their stress is theirs to manage. You can listen, you can offer support, but you don't need to absorb their emotions as if they were your own. This is where emotional maturity comes in. You can say, I see that you're upset. I'm here for you, but I need you to communicate with me in a respectful way. I want to support you, but I can't be responsible for how you feel right now. I care about you, but I won't allow myself to be pulled into a cycle of negativity that isn't mine. This isn't cold or unkind. In fact, it's healthy. You're offering support without taking responsibility for their internal world. If you don't set these kinds of boundaries, resentment will build. You will begin to feel like your partner's emotional caretaker rather than an equal in the relationship, and that is a dangerous place to be. Emotional responsibility, the key to lasting love. The most successful relationships are not the ones where two people need each other to feel whole. They are the ones where two people choose each other from a place of strength and self-awareness. Here's the core truth. Your happiness is your responsibility. Your partner's happiness is their responsibility. Together, you build a life that enhances both of your well-being, but you do not make each other whole. When both people take full responsibility for their emotions, something amazing happens. Communication improves because you're not blaming each other for how you feel. Conflicts are resolved faster because no one is playing the victim. You both feel free rather than trapped in a cycle of emotional dependence. If your partner is upset, your role is not to fix them. Your role is to support them while they do their own inner work, and you should expect the same in return. Breaking free from unhealthy emotional cycles. Now let's talk about what happens when people don't take emotional responsibility. When someone refuses to take ownership of their emotions, they tend to fall into one of three destructive patterns. Blaming. They blame their partner for everything they feel. You made me feel this way. This leads to control, guilt, and emotional manipulation. Rescuing. They try to fix their partner's emotions, making it their mission to keep them happy at all times. This leads to exhaustion and burnout. Avoiding. They refuse to engage with emotions at all, shutting down and disconnecting. This leads to emotional distance and resentment. None of these patterns create a healthy relationship. The only way forward is to take responsibility for yourself and allow your partner to do the same. How to cultivate emotional responsibility in your relationship. Now that we understand the dangers of emotional dependency, let's talk about how to actually build a relationship where both partners take responsibility for their emotions. This isn't something that happens overnight. It requires conscious effort. But if you put these principles into practice, you'll notice a dramatic shift in the way you relate to your partner. Practice self-awareness. The first step in taking responsibility for your emotions is recognizing them. Too many people walk through life unaware of their emotional triggers, carrying past wounds into their relationships. Ask yourself, what situations tend to trigger strong emotional reactions in me? Am I blaming my partner for feelings that actually stem from my past? Do I expect them to fix something that I haven't worked on myself? Journaling, meditation, or even just taking time to reflect can help you develop emotional self-awareness. Communicate your needs clearly. A mature relationship is built on clear, honest communication. If something is bothering you, you need to express it without expecting your partner to read your mind or automatically adjust their behavior. And instead of saying, "You never make me feel appreciated," try, "I've been feeling unappreciated lately and I'd love to hear more words of affirmation from you." Notice the difference? One is blame, the other is ownership. Stop taking responsibility for your partner's feelings. This is a tough one, especially if you've been conditioned to be a fixer in relationships, but it's not your job to manage how your partner feels. Instead of absorbing their emotions, try saying, "I can see that you're upset and I want to support you, but I can't take on this feeling for you. I care about how you feel, but I also need to protect my own emotional well-being." You are not abandoning them. You are empowering them to manage their own emotions. Learn to self-soothe. One of the biggest signs of emotional maturity is the ability to regulate your own emotions without relying on your partner to do it for you. Feeling anxious? Try deep breathing, meditation, or taking a walk. Feeling overwhelmed? Write down your thoughts instead of dumping them on your partner. Feeling insecure? Remind yourself that your worth isn't defined by how your partner feels about you in this moment. The more you can handle your own emotions, the more freedom and peace you'll experience in your relationship. Choose growth over comfort. Taking responsibility for yourself isn't always easy. It's much simpler to blame your partner, to expect them to change, to avoid looking in the mirror. But true love, real lasting love, comes from two people who are committed to growth. Growth in how they communicate, growth in how they handle conflict, growth in how they support each other without losing themselves. And a relationship where both partners take full ownership of their emotions is one that will last, not because they need each other to be happy, but because they choose to build something meaningful together. Final thoughts: the freedom of emotional responsibility. When you finally understand that you are responsible for your actions, not your partner's happiness, something incredible happens. You feel lighter because you're no longer carrying emotional burdens that aren't yours. You feel stronger because you've developed the ability to manage your own emotions. You feel more connected to your partner because your love is based on freedom, not obligation. And that's the foundation of a truly fulfilling relationship. So if you take one thing away from this talk, let it be this: you are responsible for how you show up in your relationship. Your partner is responsible for how they respond. When both people embrace this truth, the relationship flourishes, not because they complete each other, but because they stand strong side by side.